Welcome to In the Now with Jim Swilley. We're doing something unprecedented today. We've never done a part 4 to one of these before, but what we're doing is too good to put a stop to it. We're talking about energy coherence, the interconnection of the physical and the metaphysical with our good friend and brother, Zach Keough. Once again, would you please welcome Zach? If you haven't watched parts 1, 2, and 3, please go back and watch those so you'll have some continuity and context. Michelle, take us back to that last thing we were talking about. Take it up here where you didn't get down to stress, the gastrointestinal disorders. If you don't know what we're talking about, stop right now, go back and watch 1, 2, and 3, and then come back and find us on number 4. All right, go.
So let's talk about stress here real quick. Stress is normally associated with the brain, right? We think of stress, we think, okay, well, it's just an overabundance of thoughts in the brain. It's causing a great deal of stress on my body. And when we experience stress, right, what the body does essentially is it exerts adrenaline and cortisol, right, which has a counter effect on our serotonin, right? So it creates an imbalance there. But it also sends signals, where do you think? Down to the stomach. Did you know that our stomach is comprised of billions of neurons, right? So that's why, again, you can experience a sensation in the stomach known as a gut instinct or gut feeling, right? So when and we're talking about tapping into your intuition, right? Intuition isn't just up here, it's in the gut, no doubt. Right? Yeah, absolutely. You can feel that sensation.
Out of your belly will flow rivers of love. Yeah,
absolutely.
That's that center part of you. Go
so
ahead.
Stress has that. It has a pervasive effect, not just on the brain, but also on the stomach. And because it's in that two-way street of communication, you're kind of getting into a cyclical pattern when you're experiencing stress, right? And it's not a good thing. I won't go into the science of that. But what else did you?
Finish out this so we can go to the next.
Too much stress can alter the composition of your gut's bacteria. We talked about dysbiosis, which is the imbalance of microbiomes, which is basically an imbalance of your good bacteria in ratio to your bad bacteria. You're never going to rid your gastrointestinal tract or GI tract of bad bacteria. You always have that, but you should have a exponentially more good
enough
bacteria
to combat it.
To combat the bad bacteria.
The light shines in darkness, but the darkness cannot overtake it.
Absolutely. There you go. And, of course, the acid within your stomach as well, okay? So there has to be a balance there, and it has to be an optimal balance in order for you to be in an optimal state of health.
Be not overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. The energy coherence is just like my consciousness is flooded
Absolutely.
right now.
Yeah.
All right, go to the next thing. This is so good.
Okay.
Or have we covered it all?
Yeah, we covered that.
Okay.
Go next slide, please. I think this one should be. Okay, we talked about the energy centers, the chakras. Again, the solar plexus, which is in the lower abdomen region, right? It is associated with inner fire will, energy, self-esteem, and personal evolution. Personal evolution, keyword. And then we have the throat chakra, which is right up in here. And again, in case you don't know how food is ingested into the body, it enters the mouth and goes through the throat, right? Enables us to resonate with things and brings about joy, communicate with nature, mind, and body, okay? And then thirdly, the third eye, which is the source of intuition, right? Clairvoyance, imagination, so forth and so on. Again, we often refer to the pineal gland as the third eye. It's this little small piece of anatomy that sits within our brain that supposedly allows us to tap into things of super nature or metaphysical in nature. A serotonin-derived hormone that regulates, we're talking about melatonin here, in the brain region. Now, let me go back and say this. Serotonin in the brain is not the same serotonin molecule that's in the stomach. The two never cross paths, but they're neurotransmitters, right? So they carry with them lots of information and signals, okay?
I want to find out more about the pineal gland because there's such a connection to things that we learned about the spirit. And if you've ever noticed when Hindus, especially Hindu women, will put that little dot right there, it's a recognition of the third eye. It's the belief that there's vision that you have beyond coming from the two eyes. That's not anti-Christian. That's the same thing as we look not at the seen things. The seen things are temporal. The unseen things are eternal. Faith is the evidence of things not seen, the substance of things hoped for. We walk by faith and not by sight. You know, all of those things. It's like as we get more and more into truth, we find out that not only was the separation from God imagined, the separation from one another is imagined. We're all really saying the same thing. Avery and I were talking about it Thursday that I'm not wearing it today, but I've started wearing my cross more. And I said it's interesting because it affects the way people interact with me. Like I notice when I wear it, people respond to me a particular way. And it's an interesting thing about symbols, how that they have a visceral effect on us. And I've noticed some people will want to bond with me in a way that I think, I know you think I'm one of you, but I'm not like you. I know you think I'm your brother in Christ. No, I'm not. I guarantee you we would find a disconnect very quickly if we talked. However, I also remember that story I told you about when I was in Korea and I met the Japanese Buddhist monk who I had all my clerical stuff on, and I had my cross in my pocket like you wear when you're dressed like that. And he didn't speak any English, but he pointed to that, asking what's on your chain. So when I pulled it out, you know how like in the vampire movies when you showed it to, like Dracula could look at it, he did just the opposite. When I showed it to him, he went, oh, and he bowed to it. And I thought, wow, that gesture just taught me something. Because I grew up in a world where Christians made fun of Buddhists. We would have made fun of his orange sheet, and that's silly, or he's going to hell, or whatever. And I thought, wow, you're at such an elevated state of consciousness that you don't see my cross as something alien, even though that's not your symbol. You respect it, and I don't speak Japanese. You don't speak English, but I feel so connected to you right now. I mean, you feel, if there is such a thing as a brother in Christ, you feel like it right now more than most Christians I've ever met. Now, what's that got to do with this? Because all of this is leading us to the same place. It's not just, the reason why I'm glad you're here today, Zach, is yes, attitude's important. Yes, words are important. I don't take any of that back. Everything that I talk about that and letting go of the past, all that's true. But if the physical is not lining up with that, you're working against yourself. A double-minded man's unstable in all of his ways. And I'm not even talking about let's promise we'll never meet again. I'm talking about something higher than that. I'm saying getting into a place where you realize I love when the voice or God would say to a prophet, come up higher. Come up higher. Let me show you something high. And he took me to a high mountain, or I will climb up on the tower to see what he will say to me, or even Jesus climbing up on the Mount of Beatitudes, and it says he climbed up there and told them, come up to where I am. There is something higher than even what we've been taught.
Absolutely. So let me just throw this out there real quick. The best way not to combat stress is to eat. We often fall victim to, when we get into a high stress state, the first thing we want to resort to is stress. There's a compound within our stomach that lines our stomach. It's called candida, right? And that candida sends signals up to the brain that says, hey, it basically is responsible for sending signals to the brain that say, hey, I want more of something of this taste, right? I want something, going back to the scripture that we introduced in Revelation, I want something that's familiar to our taste buds, right? Yeah. And so it's sending that signal. But what's difficult is if you're in a state of stress, again, you can't tap into the spirit realm so that you can make a conscious and aware decision about what you put into your body. So what happens is now the body says to the brain, just reach for something and just do it quick because I need this satisfied down here, right? That's candida. And when Dr. Joe Dispenza was talking about the body making decisions instead of the brain. Again, this is why they call it the second brain, is because the two are conversing with one another. And if one overrides the other, if I don't give this the opportunity to tap into a source of information or a source of awareness or whatever the case may be, I'm going to end up adhering to this down here. And this down here is just saying, hey, first thing that comes to your mind, get it. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? McDonald's, Jack in the Box, whatever is marketed so well and now is part of imbued into our subconscious because they do such a great job of marketing it, right? It's the first thing that comes to our mind, so it's the first thing we reach for.
For a lot of us, it's sugar. I know for me,
yes.
I have to deal with, like, if I'm really stressed or upset or whatever, I don't want to drink. I don't have, like, drinking doesn't feel, that's not cathartic to me. I want ice cream. You know what I mean? And, and I'm not saying it's bad to eat ice cream, but when you eat it out of a response to stress or a negative feeling, it really spirals you downward. And then it's the way addiction works. It's not cool.
So even after you've consumed it, within probably minutes, you've just realized, I just made this whole thing worse.
It's immediate regret.
Because it tasted good to my sense.
It does not scratch the
itch. It didn't resonate down here. In fact, I think it maybe made it worse, right?
Yeah.
And because you think that, now that compounds the whole process.
Right.
Right? So it's a cyclical thing. I want to get to the point where I'm able to tap into the unseen. And again, this predates really, as far as me getting this information. I think we all want to somehow tap into that unseen realm, right? I think for me, I'm at a point, and I know we're getting ready to close here, so I'm going to have to fast forward a little bit. I want to get to that point where I can communicate with those voices that are in my heart, right? And I'm talking about awareness, elevated states of awareness and consciousness. So again, that I can make those conscious decisions, because I know that there were things that my grandfather and his great-grandfather, so forth and so on, there are some things that they adopted as part of their lifestyles. And when they speak to me, they say, hey, we did that when we were your age, or whatever the case may be, probably not conducive for you. I'm just letting you know that now.
That's the whole concept of Hebrews 12. We're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses.
Absolutely.
Because the idea is that when you look at the original language, it means that we're in an arena and the ancestors are sitting in the stands cheering us on. Like they actually become coaches for us.
I talked about this a while back on my Facebook page, and again, I'm going to make another Beatles reference. John Lennon, who wrote a song back in '68 titled Julia, which was after his mother. And it's a very, very beautiful song. When he wrote the song, he did it in honor of his mother, but at the same time, while he's describing it, he's actually describing his new wife at the time, which was Yoko Ono. Julia, ocean child. Ocean child, that's what Yoko means in Japanese, is ocean child. But again, he's singing to his mother. Why do you think that's so? Because when you transition out of this life, your energy goes somewhere. Something or someone subsumes your energy in some capacity. That's why when I come across some of you or another person, I say, there's just something about you that reminds me of my mother or my father or my grandfather, because they've somehow subsumed that. And it's not just their appearance, or maybe it is, right? Maybe there's some anatomical structure or facial features or whatever that maybe remind you. But when I talk to you, there's just something in your spirit that just makes it
No
resonate.
doubt about it. And that's sometimes why you feel, like, Leona, you said, Ken reminds you of your brother who had already passed. Like, he doesn't look like him, but he said it's just, there's a similarity. And it's not that you don't love him as himself, but that does... I know you have a connection with Toby and with me. It's like it's a beautiful thing. I nearly think it's the highest meaning of what Jesus said. There's nobody that has given up family members that will not receive. Those people will come back to you in the form of someone else, and it doesn't replace that person, but it's like a comforting thing to realize, wow, we're in a plane where I haven't really lost them. So that when you speak to Ken, you're also saying hey to your brother. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's like that's sort of the positive thing of channeling or mediums or whatever. Well, I was having a conversation with Jackie one day where I actually started saying words to her that she needed to hear her father say, and she said this sounds very different from things that she says I didn't hear you. I just heard my father speak, and I totally knew what she meant. It was like, yeah, we just, for lack of a better term, had a seance. It's like I just channeled him and let him say things to you. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think if we
see, you can't say that in church.
No.
They'll be trying to cast a new age devil out of you.
Absolutely.
And you want to go, you don't understand. This is what the ascended masters, including the Bible writers, believed in. Jesus said, you might not be able to receive this, but John the Baptist is Elijah. Anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely. Well, they even said that about Jesus. Who do the people say that I am? Well, some say you're Elijah. Some say you're.
And to them, he was.
Yeah, absolutely.
To them, he was.
In other words, he had just subsumed a different energy about himself, right?
Yeah.
Something that was familiar to the Judeans or the Jewish people.
I know I've interrupted you, but is there another? Is this it? Is it?
I think we'll stop right here.
Okay.
But I will say this is something that's also interesting about this is also being able to perceive your past in a different light.
Yeah.
So recently, I will, as part of my schooling there in Alabama, there was a gentleman by the name of Brigadier General Dozier, and you may know him, Ernie, I'm not sure. In the early 80s, in December of 81, this guy and his wife were both living in Italy, and an event that happened that is unforgettable, right, an indelible mark on his memory, and that was he was kidnapped by a local, a rogue group of people, right? They were Italians. And so him and his wife were held hostage for approximately 42 days. And now they weren't treated inhumanely by his testimony, right? But the fact that they were still captured, it's still a terrorist event. I mean, anybody that goes through that is just like terrified of that and would give cause for some kind of post-traumatic stress. Now, what's interesting is when he's telling the story, he's doing it in such a rather kind of a jokingly manner. He was rather a pleasant guy. Mind you, he's in his 80s. And so while he's telling the story, we're all intrigued by it. By the fact that he's even telling it in a gesterly fashion is even more amazing. But he says, he kind of concludes it with this one thing. He says, even after 30 years, 32 plus years after the event, or 33 years, I think, after the event occurred, and this was just a few years ago, he said, I made a decision to go back, because every year after that, he would go back and talk to the people who had rescued him. It was just kind of a thing, right? But after 33 plus years, he decided to go back and meet his captors and make amends.
Wow.
Now, I don't know about you, but that tells me that when I tap into another energy, when I'm elevated on a certain level of consciousness, I've relabeled the meanings of certain feelings I experience, and that enables me to look at my past in a different viewpoint.
Woo! Now you just opened a whole nother thing. Welcome to part 17 of... All right, we're going to have to put initially you said there's a possibility you come back next week, but I'm not sure, I don't know if you can do that or not. But you're always welcome. And I think this is just amazing. I think this is the best ones we've ever done. Would you tell Zach how much we appreciate him being here? Good stuff. Thank you so much for being with us on In the Now with Jim Swilley. We'll see you next time. Peace.